Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
So, we can't even go on the property? Is that what's happening here?
That's correct.
So what happens if I try to walk up there?
I'll stop you.
I'm a journalist, though.
There should be more people here. It's really a shame, and for the RCMP just to follow AHS like this is wrong. Like, why is this closed off?
It's just really heavy on my heart what's happened here today. It's a very, very sad day in Alberta.
I came down for freedom, freedom for Canadians, freedom around for freedom around the world.
Nobody's talking about the fact that people who attend this church are not spreading COVID-19. They are all healthy individuals who are enjoying the fellowship and support of one another.
What they're still not understanding is that God's people is a gathering of people. The word that we translate to church means assembly. And so that assembly can happen anywhere.
Sheila Gunn Reid for Rebel News, and I'm just finishing up a very long day here at GraceLife Church west of Edmonton, Alberta. At dawn today, so Wednesday, RCMP moved in to enforce an Alberta Health Services closure order issued to this church way back in January. Now, normally we read about Christian persecution in the history books. However, it would appear that today may have been the first time ever that we were able to live stream Christian persecution in real time as it happened. That closure order that was enforced today was issued because this church remains non-compliant with the public health orders placed on places of worship that limit congregations to just 15% of fire code capacity, while retail remains at 30%. Those restrictions also prevent singing. They force congregants to wear masks and social distance from each other. And you'll recall that this church is the home church of Pastor James Coates. He garnered international attention after spending 35 days in a maximum security provincial facility after he turned himself into authorities for violating the public health orders by refusing to force his congregation to abide by them, something Coates and the congregation both agree is a violation of their religious freedom. Now, this morning, shortly after 6 a.m., RCMP and private security contractors from Paladin and Fast Fence moved in to erect not one but two fences on this church and then wrapped one of the fences in a black tarp, effectively putting the church in a mask. What we're seeing here is the RCMP occupying a church in Canada, and they plan to do it for the long haul. They've brought in porta potties, which means that there will be somebody on site here monitoring the church 24 hours a day to make sure that this church does not breach the security fence on their own property, cut the locks, and hold service again. It's outrageous.
Well, just when you thought the odious actions of law enforcement against GraceLife Church couldn't get any worse, we witnessed a raid on this facility on Wednesday, the type of raid cops carry out typically against vicious biker gangs, not a church. Apparently incarcerating Pastor James Coates for more than a month in a maximum security facility in Edmonton was not punishment enough. Now law enforcement has effectively incarcerated Pastor Coates' church. And the question is, why? And with more on the ongoing saga of Pastor Coates and the GraceLife Church is our very own Sheila Gunn Reid, who was on ground zero when the the cops marched in. So Sheila, my first question to you is, who do you think should shoulder most of the blame for that outrageous raid on Wednesday, the rank and file of law enforcement or Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, who I thought, well, at least once upon a time, he was a champion for religious freedoms?
I think Jason Kenney should shoulder the blame, but also the health minister in Alberta, Tyler Shandro. And I think every single MLA who saw what happened on Wednesday and who doesn't speak out against that heavy-handedness, that authoritarianism, the stuff that we never thought that we would ever see here in Alberta, every one of them that doesn't speak up and lend their voice to the side of freedom on this issue, they shoulder the blame. Those cops there yesterday, you know, I did end up on the wrong side of a couple of them. But by and large, they are acting as the enforcement arm of Alberta Health Services. The health minister, Tyler Shandro, is in charge of them and the premier is in charge of him. And, the trouble starts at the top, and there's only one way to undo it. And it's those two men who can fix this. And every other MLA who doesn't speak up, they're part of the problem.
You've touched upon a very interesting issue here, Sheila. Those MLAs, and we know there are many, do not like what happened on Wednesday, one iota. But the question is, do they speak up? Do they try to orchestrate, I don't know, a palace coup a la Patrick Brown back in 2018? Or do they just grumble about it and not say anything and go about their business?
Well, I think it's a win-win here for them if they do speak up. They speak up and they can sleep at night, and they don't have a crisis of conscience. But also, there's some self-preservation in all of this because the tide is turning very quickly here in Alberta. Jason Kenney was very popular before the lockdown, and even during the pandemic, he was pretty popular. He said that he was sort of taking a more North Dakotan approach to the lockdown until all of a sudden he wasn't. Until pastors were being arrested in Calgary for feeding the homeless, until protesters were being arrested in all parts of the province and issued lockdown tickets, until Pastor Coates started serving 35 days in jail, until restaurant owners like Chris Scott at the Whistle Stop were threatened with contempt of court for opening their businesses in an act of economic survival. That's when the tide started turning. And now the government has escalated this. And I thought when Pastor James went to jail and they found a way to strike a deal with a new prosecutor and get him out while he awaited trial, that would be the end of it. But now they've escalated it. And I don't know how the government backs out of this. I have no idea.
Sheila, I had you on last week, of course, and I thought it was a happy ending to an odious story. Pastor Coates being incarcerated for some 35 days in a maximum security facility, a terrible one in Edmonton. And then this happened. I got to be honest, Sheila, this caught me completely by surprise. I thought the story was done a week ago, but now, as you said, it's been escalated. And what is the end game here?
Well, what really is the end game? This church has had a closure notice on its door since January. I take a picture of it every time I'm there, every single week when I walk into a completely full church, whether Pastor James is there or not. Whether it's Pastor James or Jake Spence, the associate pastor who stepped up and covered off the congregation and did sermons while Pastor James was in jail, knowing full well that he could end up there too. That sign has been on the door since January. It's April. They haven't had an outbreak at the church since that sign went up. So why now with the heavy-handed enforcement action? Why now? Is it because Pastor James is out or because we went back into lockdown? But the church has been violating lockdown anyway. So what prompted the decision yesterday?
And I think this is one hell of a political loser for Premier Kenney to pursue, Sheila. I don't see how this gets the majority of the populace of Alberta on board. Yeah, lock them down, fence them off. And the optics look dreadful. In a couple of days, it'll be Sunday. What's going to happen? This is usually when the congregation comes to take part in church services. Are they going to come anyway and just worship outside that ugly fence?
Well, that's the thing with this church. They are, I was going to say they're like Arby's. You can't keep them down. That's my ongoing joke. But, they have such optimism, right? Even while their fences were being erected around their church, and not just one fence, but two sets of fences, a steel gate checkpoint at the end of the property, and a black tarp being wrapped around the face of the church like a mask. They remained optimistic. They said, well, good thing this happened on a Wednesday. We've got 4 days to plan for what happens on Sunday. So they are going to figure something out before Sunday. I just don't know what that is yet. The last time I talked to them, nobody knew what it is yet. But the landowner next door is allowing people onto his property, churchgoers and their supporters, which is something the RCMP didn't take into consideration when they put up those fences. They thought that they would be keeping everybody right far away on the other side of the road where the journalists normally stand. But people can get very close to their church now. And, I don't know what's going to happen on Sunday, but I know something will, because even when they locked up Pastor James, the church went on. And so if the government thinks this is about a building for them, they misunderstand everything that's happening here.
Well, Sheila, I'm sure you're going to be there on Sunday to lend witness to what does happen. One thing we do know for sure on Sunday that we are not going to see is any kind of violent actions.
Ever.
And this is what really, grinds my gears about what we saw happen on Wednesday. This is not an ISIS cell. This is not Hell's Angels. This is not a mafia clubhouse. This was a place of worship with peaceful people that just want to go minding their own business. And for some reason, and I don't know what's in Jason Kenney's head, Sheila, he decided to double down on trying to stamp out this thing. I don't think it's going to end well for the government, that is.
Yes, but like you say, it's not going to end in violence,
No.
at least not from the church. That's for sure. It's really something to see how this church conducts themselves with such dignity and staying true, unlike Jason Kenney, to their Christian ideals. They talk to the cops and they say, when this is all over, please come to our church. You're welcome here. We pray for you. We hope that that God changes your heart and that you understand that what you're doing here is wrong. They're so full of forgiveness and kindness, which I think makes it so disgusting how the mainstream media shows up with security guards to keep them safe from these kind-hearted, forgiving Christians.
Hey folks, that was an excerpt from my show, Rebel Roundup. Now, to get the full meal deal, why not go to Rebel News Plus, sign up, and never miss a Rebel News Plus show in the future.